It's time once again for another episode of Georgia Business Radio. Broadcasting live from the Pro-Business-Channe studios in Atlanta. And now here's your host, Rich-Casanova.
All right, welcome to another exciting episode of Georgia Business Radio with your host, Rich-Casanova, alongside Craig Williams. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Doing
Great.
Exceptionally well.
We have a great show. We normally spotlight and highlight folks doing business throughout the state of Georgia, industry leaders, thought leaders, and we have a special guest here joining us on today's episode.
Extra special.
Right? Okay.
Of course we all are.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
special. But.
Absolutely. And I imagine you, as well as most of our listeners, caught the President's State of the Union address.
Yes, I did.
And amazing conversation that has continued since then. And so without any further delay, let's go ahead and introduce our guest joining us in the studio, Administrator of the SBA, Maria Contreras-Sweet. Became the 24th Administrator of the U.s-small-business-administration, a member of the President Obama's cabinet on April 7, 2014. SBA is charged with supporting America's small businesses, which create nearly 2 out of 3 net new private sector jobs in our economy and employ half of our nation's private sector workforce. In nominating Contreras-Sweet to lead the SBA, President Obama said, Maria was the driving force behind the major job creation and major public investments in infrastructure and in housing in California. As a champion of women-owned and family-owned businesses, and also as someone who's moved to California from Mexico as a young girl and whose mother worked long hours to support Maria and her 5 siblings. She knows firsthand the challenges that working families and recent immigrants are facing. So if I may, Maria, our administrator, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Lovely to be here with you.
Pleasure to have you here. And so obviously you were at the inaugural address.
Well, it wasn't inaugural, but I was.
I'm sorry, yeah,
the
State of the Union,
sure.
Yes.
Yes.
State of the Union. He's done 2 of those, already. So your thoughts and takeaways and observations in terms of your perspective from the Small Business Administration. What were some key indicators or takeaways?
I was really heartened by the overall tone of the address in that it was so forward-looking, and he was really providing us a long view of what our country's possibilities are. And so I appreciated that he wasn't in the weeds. But more specifically, the sub-points that I was taken in by was, number one, he really spoke to the future of our country and the innovation that we have spurred around the world. And that really speaks to me, having this role as the voice for small businesses across the country, because I am proud at every cabinet meeting when we post the job numbers, and we've now reported that we are at 70 consecutive months of job growth. We have never seen this in the history of the U.S. And I always get to boast that 2/3, as you just aptly pointed out, the majority of that growth is coming from small businesses. And so it is important for us at the SBA to work with businesses across the country to continue to spur the innovation that not only grows the mom and pops, but also the ones that are scaling and becoming really the global leaders of our nation.
Yeah, the future global leaders. Yes, 70 months. I heard that stat as well, and it's just, unbelievable, right? It's just
remarkable.
Amazing. Yeah.
When you see that we have cut unemployment in half, that we have doubled the market value of most of our corporations. The economy is so strong, but we've got to keep this going.
Yeah.
People are enjoying the lower fuel prices.
Right.
Yeah. It's a good time.
got an applause when he mentioned the gas prices. Yeah, it's funny how we all relate to that. Yeah.
How's that?
So back up just for a second. Your history prior to this announcement of you becoming the administrator. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I got into infrastructure pretty quickly. I was really interested. I had spent quite a few years, I don't want to say how many years, 15, I'll just say it, at Westinghouse, which is a globalized operation. And so we were very much into infrastructure, goods movement, logistics. And so I was asked to serve as California Secretary of Transportation and really pushed forward some of the largest advances like the east span of the Oakland Bay Bridge.
Wow, right.
I did double tracking, some of the greatest investments in double tracking for our railroad systems. And so that's where I learned about what I'm doing today, I have to tell you, because I wanted to have as many small businesses partaking of that work, because you have to do with the counterintuitive. You have to debundle the work so that you can get small businesses at the table. But they would say, well, where do I get capital? How do I get counseling? How do I actually get to do contracting? And that's what we do at the SBA. We provide counseling, contracting, and capital.
prior to Westinghouse, you do have a history of small business yourself. Tell us a little bit about your early small business
Well,
ventures.
after having what I just described, that experience of helping small businesses, what I learned was that they really did need capital. And so I decided to start up a private equity fund to help finance small businesses. I exercised my stock options for my years at corporate, took a little bit of that, and started investing in businesses. And what I saw was that in many times I was taking an equity position in their company when they didn't really need to give up. I think equity is the most expensive type of capital.
Most definitely.
So my last business was starting a community bank in Los Angeles.
So there's been a lot of intentionality, not only on the president's, but his campaign, his cabinet have been real intentional about making sure that these numbers are where they are. So it's very important. Like our friend here, Cassius Butts, as well, how intentional he's been in the region. It's cohesive. It's a cohesive, interactive. Everybody's involved in making sure that there are numbers that are changing, as opposed to just poof, all of a sudden, all these numbers.
We are driving this change.
Yes.
As soon as the president took office, you may recall that he passed the Jobs Act of 2010, and that drove a series. Hundreds and hundreds of streamlined regulations, much more opportunity to raise capital, both from the SBA point of view, where it's debt capital, to equity. Now that Mary Jo White has released the SEC rules, where you now have what I call a mini IPO. So on both sides, whether it's debt, seed capital, SBA has the largest seed capital in the world, and people don't even know that it exists. So one of the things that we have to do is also brand. So the president's taken aggressive, intentional actions. SBA has been very intentional in their outreach. We have reached out to credit unions, for example, to engage in our lending. We have more, as you just saw this morning, more lenders teaming up with us, and we have more technology to make certain that the public is able to get through that labyrinth of our applications and that process more effectively.
And 48 hours after the union address,
Right.
he dispatched his cabinet members, and here we are 48 hours later. You're here in Atlanta. And
Oh, listen. After the address, we went into the White House, and I don't want to tell you how late we were there. So for me to get to the airport at 6 o'clock in the morning was really painful to be here, but we all did it.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, I remember I saw the media coverage of that announcement that cabinet members were going to be dispersed throughout the U.S. And is that something fairly new, or is that common after the address, or to continue the message, or?
I think it's our own propensity to do it, but this time, again, there was more intentionality because I think that people are just hearing the wrong message.
Yeah.
And we need to lift people up and remind them about the power of the U.S. We need to remind them about the possibilities and the opportunity that lies. We are the greatest power on earth.
Yes.
And for anybody to say the counter is just not true. And so, again, when you see, and this is what the president pointed out, he said, when people need leadership, they're not calling China. They're calling the U.S.
Absolutely.
It is the U.S. that is the preeminent power. And so I think, to our great lament, we're seeing that, that people are somehow perceiving that America is not strong, and we are the most preeminent, the most powerful economic force, and we continue to be the ones that are the peacekeepers around the world. And it's just important for people to really understand what kind of country they're living in.
And the numbers back it up. The numbers back it up.
The metrics are all there.
Yes.
As I mentioned beforehand, I watched the address, and I wish I would have taken better notes, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he said something to the equivalent of we represent a combined economy of some 8 other most powerful countries. It's just the stats are amazing.
Let's talk about our defense power.
Yeah.
Our defense.
Okay,
and
yeah.
he said that our defense budgets and efforts
Right.
and everything are the size of...
Yeah, second to none, yeah.
Right.
So I know we definitely want to talk about the impact on Atlanta entrepreneurs and what's on your docket here while you're traveling through Georgia. But I want to remind our listeners listening to Georgia Business Radio with your host, rich-casanova, Craig Williams, on the pro-business channel. We're having a conversation with the U.S. Small Business Administrator, Maria Contreras-Sweet. So talk to us about what's on your docket and the impact on Atlanta entrepreneurs.
Well, I wanted to say a couple of things
Sure.
first, just to back up for 1 second. The 3 points that I took away from the President's State of the Union were really key. One is to be entrepreneurial, to move forward, and to understand what we're trying to do is what we call upskilling, to lift Americans. And so when the President talked to the fact that we needed to get free education at the community college level. I thought that was a really important takeaway. I didn't want us to lose sight of that because I think other countries invest quite a bit in education, and I think that now as we see that the standards are being raised, we need to make sure that we're at least continuing to lead the way in that regard too. So I thought that was an important point. The second that I took away from what he said is the globalization of the marketplace. That is that before, when I was growing up, and I don't mind dating myself, what we saw was that, one florist shop competed with another florist shop across the street. And now that same florist shop, when I go back to visit them, they're concerned about the flowers that are coming in from Kenya. So we are all in a globalized economy, and entrepreneurs, particularly small businesses, need the resources to be able to safely navigate through that new borderless marketplace. So SBA is providing services in that regard. And then the third point that I just wanted to say is one of the things that entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs say to me is that they have job lock. They're in a job that maybe they don't really love, and they can't leave because they don't want to lose their health benefits. And so that's why I argue for the ACA, for the Affordable Care Act, because it allows an entrepreneur to take those benefits with them and to start a business and restart a business and not be denied for health care coverage. So while there were many important messages, those were my 3 takeaways.
All right, well said. And so now you're here in Georgia, obviously, in Atlanta. And you have quite a few events coming here to downtown, mobilizing the economic opportunity. Talk to us about that.
Well, what I'm really impressed by here locally is that you have set a standard here in Atlanta. You have made some aggressive steps to provide new tax credit, market credits to companies to relocate here. I've been impressed with the level of engagement, the movement, the automobile industry. You're taking so much of California's entertainment industry away.
We're the other East Coast.
You are the hip-hop capital of the world.
We call it Hollywood.
Hollywood,
yeah,
exactly.
And speaking of the automotive, Porsche and now Mercedes-Benz of North America.
So you are our envy now.
We have Kia, too, and a number of other.
Yeah.
It's really quite impressive what you've done here. And so as a result of that, we have had to gear up at SBA. And our team, which I'm here with, Cassius and Terry, our regional administrator, who is my voice here, a presidential appointment, and Terry, who is a career person here on the ground every day, helping entrepreneurs. Both and their entire teams here are focused on what we have now achieved, which is record lending in this community.
Yeah, give us some of those stats. I mean, I know Cassius has shared those with us in the past, and it's just we had Cassius on maybe a year or so ago, and at that juncture, I think it was in the neighborhood of about $8 billion. And maybe, I don't know if Cassius, you want to jump in on some of those stats, or
at that time it was $8 billion in the region. For the last 5 years, we've backed nearly $20 billion in loans to small business, but particularly here in Georgia. I love that clap. That thing. It always, when that happens, that's what happened when the administrator walked in. It is.
There you go.
Okay, hold it down in the gallery here. Yeah.
But we attribute that to the administrator giving us the opportunity and the resources to reach out to folks like yourself to carry her message, to make certain that everyone is hearing what's taking place, not just in the region, but the nation, because we have the greatest nation in the world. We're just happy to have her and host her here in Atlanta today.
But the important thing that I wanted to drive, the numbers are really impressive to have record level lending. SBA operates on average about $120 billion portfolio of loans that would otherwise, without our guarantee, would not get out. We're not a direct lender. When you go into a bank and you're about to be turned down, we provide a guarantee. So some people have a wealthy uncle. We're Uncle Sam. Right. And so you come in and so someone's about to say no, we say we're going to stand in and support you and be your guarantor so that if, in the case, God forbid, that there's a default, then we are there to backstop your loan. But what I want to say is the really important thing from a business standpoint, and I'm a community banker, as you heard me say earlier, is that this is operating now both what we call our 7A and our 504. I'm sorry to be arcane about this, but these loans are running now at zero subsidy. So it's not costing the taxpayer money because our team here is running these with great consulting, strong underwriting, and managing the loans very carefully. And so we're not having the loan loss reserves that had sometimes been attributed to banks. So it's very impressive to have record level lending. The second piece that we're very, very enthusiastic about is our contracting numbers. We have a 23 congressionally mandated goal of 23% of directing the procurement of the federal government to small businesses. 23% is our mandate. The SBA reached a 24.99%. That represents increase of billions of dollars fed to small businesses through vending operations through the supply chain. And that's also an incredible story for us to tell. And so we created hundreds of thousands of jobs as a result of these efforts.
I mean, the ripple effect just goes on for decades. Talk to us about the number one challenge that you face as your role as the administrator, on a day-to-day or regular basis. What's the challenge that you experience?
It's twofold. One is internal. Internal to us is the modernization effort. I really want to make certain that we're embracing technology so that we can reach out to people in ways that we never imagined. How do we use social media? And how do we use technology so that it is easy as possible and streamlined as possible to take out a loan? When you can now deposit a check from the comfort of your sofa in your,
right.
in your
or
home.
At the beach.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When I first started, you went up to a double lock window
Right.
and, went through this extraordinary process. And so how do we take advantage to make sure that we continue to be relevant? For example, you see that now people are taking out loans on the internet, and it's very convenient. We have to stay relevant and current. And so I think it's how we embrace technology internally. I think that's important.
Well, when people can go online, quicken loans or mortgage for their home or whatever, they should be able to, as a small business owner, proprietor, have some of those same tools. Talk to us about some of the misconceptions that folks not familiar with the SBA might have.
Well, so now what I did was, as a result of this initiative, before you'd go knock on the door of a bank and then you'd complete your application and wait for what I call a really slow maybe.
Right.
It's like, wait. And, maybe stay with us. It's like the airlines, where we're going to get you on in 20 minutes, maybe.
Yeah, on the tarmac.
And then 2 hours later, you're still waiting. And so what we wanted to do is come up with a solution. So we call it LINC, L-I-N-C. And what it seeks to do is it's sort of like do you know Match.com? No, don't tell me. Don't
You see
tell
my
me.
profile?
Match.
Yeah. Casanova's on Match.com.
Well, you answer a simple 20 questions, and we direct your answers to a series of banks in your area that have an interest in wanting to give you that loan. And so this way, we set up a date, but this one's with the relationship that's going to be a banker.
So you mentioned earlier about branding and how important it is to approach and what your position is when you go for these loans as to the banks or through the SBA. How important is branding and how you're positioned as an authority or what have you? Your brand is very important, and they are going to do their research on who and what you're presenting to them. How important is that?
Well, I think, I have to tell you, having started 3 different businesses, I wish that I had known that SBA was there. And so I'm the first to tell you that I didn't know and I didn't partake. And now that I know what we have, I say, why wouldn't you? These are free services, that your taxpayer dollars put up. And so that you can go walk into a small business development center or one of our 68 district offices here. You can, meet up with Terry and that you can go in and get free counseling about how to write your business plan, how to iterate, how to reiterate, how to pivot, how to scale, how to repair your business, how to prepare to go in to see a banker so that you put your best foot forward. These are important attributes that really help you go further in life. And the second piece is, as I was pointing out earlier, that then when you want to have diversify your marketplace, we can introduce you to corporations that have an interest in your product. We can introduce you to federal government departments, the education, the agriculture department, Department of Defense, Department of Commerce, Department of State. All these departments buy things every single day, things that everyday people sell. And so how do you diversify your portfolio so you can sell to corporations, not just to other small businesses in your community, and to the government? We can certify you. We can get you ready for that. And we can help make those connections.
Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to getting a lot of those individuals in here from the government contracting and SBA side, an 8A consultation, and have them share a little bit. Basically what we do here at the Pro Business Channel is give that voice to those individuals so they can get that information out to them. So for businesses to know and entrepreneurs to know, how do I go about it? Because a lot of times if people are thinking about doing business with the government, it could be overwhelming, or going after those contracts or going after that money that's out there. We're talking about $20 billion. I only need about $20,000.
Right, exactly.
And how do I position myself? How do I tell them my story or have a third party speak on my behalf? And so we like to have those stories told in here, and we use media also to promote that. So,
but you just mentioned branding, and what I think is really, really important is that people ask me, what's the difference between a large and a small corporation? Really, I just, if I'm going to go to work, what's the difference? And let me tell you what the difference is. If you spend $1 with a small business, 68 cents stays in your community, as opposed to like barely 40 cents if you spend it with a large retailer, because they bank outside of the local community, and so much of it goes outside. And so there is a difference. Another difference is that when you have a local restaurant in your community, it's creating local jobs. It's creating a unique atmosphere to your community. Some of us go to malls, and I like those big retail sales and bargains like anybody else. But when I go to a local shop, I know I'm going to get a unique item. I know that I'm going to be able to talk to them, and they're going to talk to me more. They're going to know more about their product and really be able to educate me. And it creates a very different vibe about a community that I can come here and go to unique stores. It's what attracts me to Atlanta.
Yeah, talk to us about about the small business criteria. How do you describe a small business? We get that question a lot, right? Like, what is a small business versus a Fortune 500? Where is there a benchmark or some of the criteria or key indicators?
You are not going to like this answer. Okay. I have to tell you, you're not going to like this. We generally say about 250 employees and under is small. That's what we generally say. But what I have to tell you is that SBA is responsible for what we call this NAICS code, NAICS.
Here we go.
And that's the National Association of Industry Classification System. And that's where we decide what is small. For example, if you're a small shoe manufacturer, then about 500 employees makes sense. If you're a shipbuilder, then maybe 2,000 employees. Depending on the industry that you're competing in, we make a different demarcation. Right. And so we do have a standard, and we review these standards every single year to set the right size for small in each classification.
And in some cases, it could be based on their annual volume or their business
it's either
volume.
Employees or revenue.
Right.
That's correct.
We just got a couple more minutes left. So on a kind of a personal level, what was that phone call like when you got the call that you're going to be brought up to be the administrator for the SBA?
Oh, you have to know. Since I was running a community bank, the first thing that happens is, they first ask, if you'll give them some information, because they have to, quote, vet you.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And so you get vetted. And as soon as I did that, that was really the challenge, because all of a sudden the FBI descends on your office, and everybody was saying, FBI's at the bank.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
What did she do?
You can imagine the reverberations of that. All of a sudden I had shareholders and, and everybody calling. But truly, can you imagine walking into the Oval Office, pinching myself? Because you have to know, my personal story is I'm an immigrant, as you mentioned earlier. And so my grandmother always said, it's not the titles you have, it's what you do with the titles that you have that matters. And I've always thought about, how do I bring other people along? And she'd always say, although we've been a family of migrant workers, someday you might be able to work in an office and be a secretary. But she didn't imagine I would hold office and be a cabinet secretary.
Wow. Exactly.
And so that's the beauty of America. That's the mobility, the upward mobility that we want to see and replicated over and over again. And it's what I aspire to do with the SBA, to make sure that their stories, the people across the country that have aspirations to leave a legacy for their children, can.
And having awesome grandmothers who have that hope and drop that possibility into you.
Absolutely, because I know your mother worked long hours to support you and your 5 siblings. So what might like be at Thanksgiving table when what kind of conversations take place that at your stature, at your level now, right? Do they just kind of treat you like any differently, or?
Oh, that's the beauty of family. They always sort of set us
They
straight,
ground
don't
you.
they?
They ground you. I have kids. They ground you. That's what they're there for.
They are there. Number one, they will defend you to the bitter end.
Yeah.
And then they lift you up when you're taken down and puff you up a little bit every morning. But also they keep you honest and straight. Yeah. And that is, they bring a sense of reality,
that balance.
And so that's the wonderfulness of family, and they really help ground you.
So kind of one more question, then obviously feel free to expound on what's going on here in Atlanta. But talk to us about what do you enjoy most about your job?
I love being out. We have a day that we call Small Business Saturday. We have Thanksgiving, Black Friday, and then Small Business Saturday, where we lift small businesses across the country. And there is nothing that gives me more pleasure than to actually go out and have somebody say, I was lost. I didn't know what to do. I came out. I was a veteran, and I had no sense of direction. but a volunteer at SBA came forward. One of our SCORE volunteers came forward, gave me some guidance, through the support of SBA. And now what I'm doing is I'm now employing, 30 other employees, and this is what I do today. And they tell me their stories with such pride, and their children are there, and the family's all running the business. And you just say, that's what America's about. And America harvests these opportunities with such bounty like no other country in the world. Yeah. And that's what gives me a great sense of pride.
Yeah, exception to none. So any closing thoughts or before we wrap up here?
Well, I want to tell you that when I approached SBA, I put in a frame that I call SBA, write the letters, smart, bold, and accessible. And the arc of, I hope that the legacy of my work is around smart being, smart systems. How do we deploy, as I mentioned earlier, all of the technology to make sure that we're using it and that small businesses know how to use it and that they understand what the pain points are in their life. What's the pain point? What do you get frustrated by in any moment of your life? And if you're experiencing it, maybe somebody else is too. Yeah. So there's a solution that you can build a business around. And so think about that and how can we help you do it? The bold is about the bolder market making to say, not only do I have the ability to do business here in my local community here in Atlanta, but how do I also take advantage of the corporate, the federal supply chain, and the international marketplace? And we want to make sure that we're doing that. And the A about accessibility, I don't want to leave anybody behind. Dr. Martin Luther King taught us something. And what he said was, what good is it to be able to sit at an integrated counter if I can't afford to buy the hamburger? He understood that while we're advancing civil rights, we have to advance market rights. And so I want to make certain that everybody has an opportunity to be able to sit at that table and participate. So we're not going to go help people go back to buy the hamburger. We're helping them go back to buy the restaurant. We're building ownership, and I think through ownership we can strengthen this country. And every family that's interested in doing it, I want them to know that SBA is waiting for them eagerly to help them fulfill their dream.
Well, your legacy and that legacy will continue to reign true here at Pro Business Channel, and we appreciate you coming by and joining us.
Thank you for lifting small businesses. Yes,
ma'am.
Absolutely.
SBA.
Pleasure having you here.
Thank you again for joining Rich Casanova and our guests on the Pro Business Channel. Use the social media links here to share today's show and stay tuned for the next episode of Georgia Business Radio.